So now that we know about the basic attributes and properties of materials, let's start having a look at how we play them together with one another in order to get realistic looking items and renders. The first step towards doing this is observing the principle of energy conservation, or reciprocity. What this basically means is that you can't get back more than was put in originally. That is simple conservation. Specifically, what it means is if you have an amount of light falling on a surface, as we have here, just some amount of light, the surface cannot reflect back either through specular reflection or diffuse reflection or anything else more light than originally hit the surface. If you take a flashlight and you shine it at a wall, the wall will never light up brighter than the surface of the flashlight. It's clearly impossible. At least unless the wall happens to have some kind of light built into it, which can also be turned up to emit additional light. So what does this mean in practice then when setting up our surfaces? Well, it means that we need to keep certain parameters balanced. For instance, here we have this funny looking little thing, and as you can see, he's got a rather attractive blue colour. And at the minute he's 100% diffuse. He's not giving any kind of specular reflection, or he's got no transparency or anything else. If we give him some reflection, let's say 100%, then he looks okay, but he also looks a little bit washed out. I mean, you look at the reflections here and the colour of them as opposed to the colour of the background that we have, clearly behind him here. We can look, for instance, I don't know, at the colour of the sky. It's that's a paler blue, and now this is a much more saturated blue over here. Why? Well, because he's coloured blue. And although in, certain ways he looks quite good, he doesn't look quite right. And the reason for this is the fact that he is not energy conserving in his surface. His surface is not behaving reciprocally. Why? Well, because he is returning to us 100% of the light that fell on him as diffuse and 100% of the light that fell on him as reflection, mirror reflection. This can't happen because it means that 100% of light is falling on him and 200% of light is coming back away from him. Thus, if we want him to have 100% total reflection, he must have zero diffuse. And this is true of materials in the physical world. Anything that has a 100% total pure specular reflection will have zero diffuse. That doesn't mean that the reflection itself cannot be coloured, as we spoke about in regard to metals in the specular video, but that coloration is not diffuse reflection. Of course, if we want this guy to not be completely totally reflective, he should have a bit of both, then these attributes should add up to 100%, so perhaps diffuse at 50 and reflection at 50. Of course, this weakens his reflections, but it strengthens his diffuse colour. And we have a level of illumination on our fellow that is more consistent with the backdrop or the environment that he is in. Diffuse and reflection, or diffuse and specular, is the most common place where you play this off, but it does also come in other places. For instance, what if, in addition to being diffuse and reflective, he also has, I don't know, let's say 50% transparency. So he's, partially transparent as well. Well, once again, he is too bright. Why? Because light is falling on him and passing through due to his transparency, but it's also reflecting off him, both as specular reflection and diffuse reflection. You see? Let's make it a bit simpler. Let's just kill the diffuse. Let's take the reflection up to 100% and the transparency up to 100%. See how incredibly bright he now is? Completely wrong. Reason why? Because 100% of the light that is falling on him is passing through him and 100% of it is being reflected off him. He is essentially doubly lit. And so these parameters should also be balanced out. So perhaps 50% reflection, 50% transparency. Once again, we get something that starts to look a good deal more realistic. Because when light strikes his surface, half of it penetrates and half of it is bounced off as a reflection. Now what you will find with materials in Lightwave is there are different ways of accounting for these energy conservation issues, and it varies from material to material. We will of course see those in due course as we get on later into the training, and we'll look at them specifically. But what you will find is that some materials, such as the standard that we are using here, do not themselves enforce any kind of energy conservation or reciprocity. Other materials, for instance here sigma, have it built in automatically. So even though you'll notice that I have a diffuse weight of 100%, as I increase the specular weight, the diffuse is automatically reduced until the point where I reach 100% specular, and as we see there is no longer any diffuse reflection. As such, in those materials that do not have the attribute reciprocity built into them, you will ideally wish to create it and make sure that you put the settings correctly for your surfaces if you want them to come out looking photorealistic, or you will of course have the option to violate the energy conservation rules if you wish to create some unusual and strange looking surface, whereas those that do have these effects built in will do it all for you and give you proper photorealistic materials. Either way, it is important to be aware of the effect so that you can create it when needed, or so that when you encounter a material that has it built in, you don't wonder why, when you've got the diffuse weight at 100 here, there is no colour to be seen. And so that is the principle of energy conservation, and how observing it helps our surfaces to render more realistically and work with the environments and the other objects that exist within our scenes.